Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
There's probably some other topics like this, but it's sad that this is true. But I feel like in that age range of just average American Christian, let's even say Christian male, you bring up in an average circle where there's not someone. Because most of the time there's not someone in those circles that's present that is gay or openly gay. You bring up the issue of homosexuality. That's the one topic you can bring up where you're going to get some like negative, visceral responses, like some crude things are going to be said, and it's not good. Like it's not. This is not the way that this should be. Like I'm convicted myself of this in the past, and it's not that way with a lot of other things that could get brought up, even sinful things, like you could even take pornography, for example. You bring up pornography in those same circles, you don't tend to get the same sort of visceral, like almost hateful in some terms, like reaction. Yeah. Like I'm even just thinking like, if you're at your average family get together at Thanksgiving or whatnot, and it's a Christian family and someone brings up, say a gay pride, the gay pride, parade or something like that gets brought up. And if someone in the family is like, has this sort of like, oh, that's, like just kind of like evil, that's dirty, or that's disgusting, or that's like kind of really, it's like, that'd be a good time to be like, that's, we don't need to talk about them like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's almost, there's this subconscious, anyhow, I'm rambling now, but there's something about this issue that causes a visceral reaction in people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and you seem to suggest that like maybe that's even a little bit more common among men than women, and I think that might be true. I mean, at least what I experienced growing up was, I think men more so than women feel this need to prove that they're not gay, or to clarify if someone like sees two dudes who are in close friendship and makes a joke about them. Or if a guy dresses in ways that are a little different than their friends and someone makes a comment about that. Women don't police each other around that kind of stuff as much as men do, and we can ask the question of why that is. But it seems like in male friend groups, there's more suspicion of, hey, are you gay? Or what are you doing? What is that? Is that gay? Yep. And then there's more of a need to very, like, in a strong way, prove that you're not. Yeah. Right? And one way you can prove that you're not is being cruel toward whatever gay is. Right? Yeah. And so I think that becomes a cycle that feeds itself over and over again, and maybe that's part of this larger conversation about like masculinity and what is healthy masculinity? What is healthy biblical masculinity? And sometimes is that a little extra? And do we feel a need? Are there too many pressures for all of us to prove some extra muscular version of American masculinity in the church that hurts us in a lot of ways, not just in maybe more homophobia in some male Christian circles, but maybe some other things as well. Yeah. So that's a whole lot bigger conversation.
So you're right that part of that is there's just this need to prove to themselves, maybe in others, or clarify that they're not gay. Okay, but I think a lot of times too, it's more sinister than that. Like, don't you think too? There's this misunderstanding of the gay couple or the gay person that they're talking about. There's almost like they perceive a particular sort of. It depends on the circles that we're talking about here, but I think with some they perceive a particular sort of sin or evil. That almost like a possession of some sort, like a dirtiness there, that they feel like they're choosing to sort of entertain and involve themselves in, and it's a particular sort of nasty, as opposed to say like a more air quotes innocent sin like theft or murder or infidelity or something, and there's a particular sort of dirtiness around, and that needs to stop, because that's not accurate. You know what I mean? That's not biblical.
And I think that's the other reason why maybe some people are uncomfortable if I use the word gay to describe myself, or if I wear a t-shirt with a rainbow flag on it is, and I'll admit, when I was growing up and I heard people use the word gay or homosexual, I could tell from context clues they meant that word to mean a particular thing. And what they meant that word to mean was gay people are, these people who have group sex parties and they all do drugs and they're all drinking and all of them hate God. Right? That was when someone used the word gay, it meant all of those things. So it makes sense to me that if I'm speaking at a church and there is a meaningful number of people in that church, that's all they've known that word gay to mean. And then I use that word to describe myself. And then I say all the other things that we've said here already. It's very confusing to them. They're like, but what the word gay means not just that you are attracted to people of the same sex, but all this other stuff that I've been told it means.
Right.
Wait, but now but then you're saying these other things that contradict it. So that's confusing. So I think that's one of the reasons why maybe people wish that I would not use that word and downplay this part of my story is it's easy for them to conflate same-sex attraction with all of the other things, stories accurate or not, that they associate with gay people.
Yes. Okay, that's accurate. And I'll submit something for your consideration. Possibly the reason this is causing such a visceral response in people is because it's not just about same-sex attraction, okay? It's about all of like the things you mentioned, the drugs and sex parties and all this type of thing. But even part of that too is like a turning your back on sort of the Western way of society and doing life, which is heterosexual, family-oriented, that type of a thing. Yeah. And I wanted to get around to this with families too, so we'll come back around to this. Yeah. But there is a certain... Sometimes it's hard to tell whether the idea comes from the church or whether it comes from society. And I think in some of this, and then I think sometimes actually ideas come from society, creep into the church, and then the church owns it and thinks that it came from the church all along, when actually the idea came from society. Yeah. And I think family is one of those things we need to touch on. But but if and when that happens, when an idea comes from Western quote unquote Christian American society or culture and comes into the church, and the church owns it, when you poke at that thing, you will get a visceral response unlike any other. I mean, I think we saw this in the last year with some of the political stuff going on. It's like when on that sort of Christian right camp, I mean, just to make it pretty practical, there's plenty of people in that camp that can't fathom how you could be a Christian and vote for Biden. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah. Like they can't fathom it. It's like, it's impossible. Like there's just, and it creates sort of this energy, this response, this good versus evil, this right versus wrong, this outrage when you poke that side. And I think whatever that is, I think the gay thing with those people, it's poking at that thing. Sure. It's almost like it's almost like it's truer to them or internalized more to them than even the gospel. It's like, well, we understand that some people believe the gospel and some people don't, but you poke at that one part where it's like, now you're poking at sort of the Western American, like ideal, the way of doing life that is so precious to us and we can't have that changed. You will get you will get a crazy response, which we saw on January the 6th when all these crazies stormed the Capitol. I'm talking about this all kind of slumped together here. I mean, it's whatever that is, you will get a really, really strong response.
Yeah. If you go back to that, that transition we talked about earlier in our conversation from the 80s to now, from assuming if a gay person wants to be straight enough, God will make them straight, to now an acceptance that for a vast majority of people, that doesn't seem to be God's will to change their sexual orientation. So go back to the 80s. For a person who believed, for the average straight Christian who had the assumption that, well, if a gay person wanted to be straight enough, God would just make them straight. Well, then it confirms that, then all the people out there who are gay just want to disobey and reject God.
Exactly.
Right. And so it was that, I think in many ways, it was this inaccurate, in many ways, scientific assumption or kind of that people, if they just prayed hard enough or if they just went to the right therapy, they could become straight.
Yes.
That's what made it easy to believe this, to have this certain kind of ish towards gay people.
Yes.
So
I have to,
because they have no one to blame but themselves. I'm doing air quotes here. They have no one to blame but themselves because they could be normal if they wanted to.
Yes.
But they're choosing not to be normal.